Today's guest speaker, Ta-Nehisi Coates, who will discuss his book, Between the World and Me. I want to extend my sincerest thanks to our sponsor, the LG&E Foundation, for their partnership and dedication to equity for the 2024 Beyond Buzzwords Speaker Series, which reaches thousands across our community. During the month of June, we of course celebrate Pride Month, Juneteenth, and Father's Day. Between the World and Me is a profound work in which Ta-Nehisi addresses his adolescent son, exploring the intimate struggles of inhabiting a Black body in America and offering a powerful framework for understanding our nation's history. I am excited to hear from Ta-Nehisi and his perspective on reflecting on the past, confronting our present, and offering a vision for the future to move forward together. Thank you to everyone for joining us today to listen and learn how to create a more equitable community. It is now my pleasure to introduce Lonnie Beller, Senior Vice President of Engineering and Construction, PPL at LG&E. Lonnie?
Thank you, Adria. It's always great to kick off these events. They're always very interesting, and at LG&E and KU, we've been a proud sponsor and will continue to do so. So just a brief introduction. Ta-Nehisi Coates is an award-winning author, as Adria just referenced, and journalist. His books include Between the World and Me and The Water Dancer, and he's currently a writer in residence at Howard University. He'll be joined today by our moderator, Trent Findley, and Trent, as many of you know, is the Director of Equitable Community at Metro United Way, and he provides leadership and oversight for Metro United Way's strategic direction to infuse an equity lens throughout the internal and external work led by the organization. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Coates and moderator, Mr. Findley.
Thank you, Lonnie, for that introduction. It's an honor to be here today to facilitate this important conversation with Mr. Ta-Nehisi Coates. His profound insights into race, history, and social justice have sparked critical dialogue and inspired many, including myself. So let's go ahead and hop into this discussion that we're going to have. So Ta-Nehisi, first, just on your writing and influence in general, you've had a significant impact on the national conversation about race and equity. How do you see your role as a writer in shaping public discourse, and what are the challenges you face in this role?
Well, first of all, I just want to thank Metro United Way for having me. And I especially want to thank Adria, Lonnie, and now you, Trent, for correctly pronouncing my name. It is a remarkable achievement. I can't remember the last time I was part of any event where the first three people that introduced the event all got my name exactly right. So I appreciate that. Not that I would have taken it personal any other way. Between the World and Me came out almost 10 years ago. And so I guess the second thing I should say is I'm just happy that there's still an audience for it in the first place. And that really leads me into your question. You know, writing, and I think anybody that's done any piece of writing, whether it was in high school, whether it was a love letter, you know what I mean, to somebody, or just an email to say something very difficult, a paper for college. Writing is very, very hard. And when you decide that you're going to do it as a career, when you decide that you're going to write essays or fiction or whatever, it only becomes harder. And so it's funny, I rarely have much time when I'm in the thing to consider much about what my impact will be or what it should be. I'm just trying to get to a book. And I was just happy Between the World and Me actually got to the level where it was an actual book. To be in a place where my work has any sort of voice in the national dialogue is a tremendous privilege. But I think you'll find that me as a writer, I don't have much perception about why that happens. I can tell you what I'm trying to do. but how it lands on other people, and how they react. There's a point where, it's like your child. Your child is out in the world, and your child has their own relationships, with people that are beyond you. And that's kind of how it is, with my work. It's mine, during the writing process. I can tell you about that. But what happens after that is frankly beyond me.
Okay, thank you. So you frequently discuss the concept of the Black body and its vulnerability. Can you elaborate on why this idea is central to your narrative and what you hope readers take away from it?
Yeah, now that I can answer, maybe a little better. Um, when you're writing, what you're trying to do is you're trying to make people feel something. All writers are trying to convey, ideas, images, thoughts, stories, etc. But for me, it was never enough, and it is never enough for people to read my work and say, "Wow, that was a really interesting concept. Wow, I agree with that guy. Wow, yeah, I'm glad he said that." What I am always trying to achieve with my writing is to haunt the reader. By which I mean, if it was, between the world and me, what I wanted was for the reader to pick that book up, read that book, have a profoundly moving experience, go to bed thinking about it, wake up thinking about it, go to breakfast thinking about it, have a conversation with their spouse about it, have a conversation with their coworker about it, tell their friends they absolutely have to read it. You're trying to take a hold of people, in a way that like great movies take a hold of people and they say, hey, have you seen X, Y, and Z? That's what you're trying to achieve with a book. And the only way to do that is to make things as tangible, as touchable, and as least abstract as you possibly can. And so we have a vocabulary that we use around the force of race and racism in American history, around the force of white supremacy in American history, that as a writer, I often find distances us from the actual problem itself. My job as a writer is to close that distance. A good book is supposed to tell you why these, big words actually matter, and not just tell you why, make you feel that they actually matter. And so the invocation of the body is literally to make it physical for you. I mean, I strongly believe that. I believe at the end of the day, the force of white supremacy is ultimately physical. But as a literary technique, to let you know that what we're talking about is we're talking about lives, years being taken off of people's lives. And when we talk about years being taken off of people's lives, we're talking about experiences that they're missing. We're talking about little league games for their grandchildren that they may not see. We're talking about weddings for their grandchildren that they may not get to attend. We're talking about all the little particular things, experiences in the kitchen, cooking, with their fathers. All the little particular things that make up a human being. And my job is to make those things as least abstract as I possibly can.
Thank you. Thank you. Between the World and Me, like we said, is written as a letter to your son. How has your perspective on the themes discussed in the book evolved since its publication, especially in light of recent events in the U.S.?
It's hard to answer. I haven't really read it. I generally don't go back. I used this metaphor earlier of it's like one of your, I feel like I had my time with the book. And after that, it really doesn't belong to me anymore. It belongs to the world. I think any writer is trying to write something that they hope, 10, 20, 30, 100 years from now, people will still find, relevant, that it'll say something about humanity. But I probably don't have much insight into the book at this point in my life.
Okay. I know that you've ventured into writing for Marvel Comics, notably with Black Panther and Captain America. How do you see the role of literature and art in advancing social justice, and what inspired you to take on those type of projects?
Well, like with everything, the writing comes first. I'm a huge comic book fan. So that was like the first thing that really, made me want to, really wanted to be in that world. I grew up as a huge comic book fan as a kid. Comic books were some of the formative literature in my life as a child. Comic books were like the first place that I saw like big words and had to, go look them up. Words like uncanny, astonishing, astounding. These were words that I hadn't heard before. Mutant. It was comic books that helped build my vocabulary as a child. So I had a deep emotional connection to the form already. And I was deeply attracted to the possibility of learning how to do it. In terms of your question about social justice, I'll just take it back to what I said before. One of the reasons why in writing we're always trying to close the gap between the theoretical and the real, between the abstract and the tangible, is to make humanity felt. People have a very, very easy time dismissing policies, dismissing ideas, dismissing notions that they can't really attach actual human beings to. Statistics have a way of obscuring your humanity. And the job of literature is to, make that humanity as realized as possible. And even when I was writing, superhero comics, I was very much trying to do that. I was trying to write a T'Challa in the case of Black Panther that, it felt like he had real human problems. I was trying to bring him down to earth, even as he, did incredible things. And I really believe that the power of people to relate to other people who maybe they would have dismissed as an other, as actual human beings, is really considerable.
All right, so you've written extensively about the historical context of systemic racism in America. How do you view the current social and political movements addressing racial injustice, and what lessons from history do you believe are most relevant today?
Well, we're coming out of a past few months of activism. And I think, let me just back up a little bit. I have a firm belief that if your politics and your political lessons only inform your narrow individual struggles, in other words, if you take an approach of human rights, or if I took an approach of human rights or civil rights that are really just Black rights or civil rights for Black people, that have no broader application to humanity, then I've missed something. I've missed something. To the extent that the Black experience gives me insight into myself as a human being, it's extremely valuable. To the extent that it's a ticket, a way of understanding human beings under social pressures, under oppression across the world, it is invaluable. To passport then. And so I say that to say that one of the more impressive things that I've seen over the past year or so is to watch people who, when they're at their best, are very much in sympathy with the taking of life that we saw on October 7th, are very much in sympathy with the death and the grieving and the mourning and are praying for a less violent world. But at the same time, knowing the history of their country, knowing what their country has been in the past, also understanding that their country has not always, or our country has not always played the best role in making room for a less violent world. When I see these kids who are upset, and are on these campuses and are furious, and maybe they don't always use the right words, and maybe they don't always have the right language. I don't know that I had the right language when I was 18 years old. I don't know that I had the right language when I was 19 years old. It takes a while to develop language that both says what you want it to say and is caring also, and is concerning to your neighbors. When I see them upset over the fact that 2% of the population on one of the most densely populated strips of land in the world has been evaporated. When I see them upset about the bombing of hospitals, when I see them upset about the bombing of schools and just the mass death that has been inflicted, I feel that they've seen that passport. I feel that they've seen of the history of struggle and that they've expanded and used it to see the humanity and struggles of other people. The movement I think about at this moment, or probably the person I think about at this very moment, is Dr. Martin Luther King, who towards the end of his life had a very, very difficult decision to make. He was a man who had made a career preaching nonviolence to Black people, preaching to Black people not to take vengeance, preaching to Black people not to act out of their fury, out of their righteous fury, out of their anger, preaching the power of it, preaching about the corruptive potential of violence. And yet he found himself in a country that was executing a very, very violent war in Vietnam. And he was caught because he had a president who had been an ally in those nonviolent struggles. And that same president was bombing kids in Vietnam. And I always admired, and I think often about the example of Dr. King to export the nonviolence that he preached in his country and remain consistent when he saw that his country was a purveyor of violence. And so I've been very, very heartened to see young people over the past few years, follow in that example and say that this is not enough. There's got to be a better way. And so I think it's a good time right now from that perspective.
Thank you. I think you make an excellent point about young people's perspectives. Let's stay right there for a second. As an educator and someone who has written for young people, what do you believe are the most critical elements that should be included in education of young Americans to foster a deeper understanding of racial issues?
Well, that's a great question. There are going to be better people than me that can answer it. But what I would say is I can, from this perspective, I can only reflect on my own experience. I think the ability to imagine is really, really important. And I think we oftentimes, unfortunately, work to remove the imagination of young people, and remove the imagination from education. I think imagination is extremely important because it is the job of each generation to make the world better. And if that generation is trained to only think within the confines of what the previous generation did, then we just aren't going to get anywhere. And so I think fostering imagination. I know like that was the biggest gift that my best teachers gave me, that my parents gave me. So I think fostering imagination is extremely important. I'm biased, so I'm going to argue for writing, and I'm going to argue for reading, and I'm going to argue for reading and writing beyond the aspect of phonics and grammar, all of which is very, very important. But for literature, again, is that kind of passport that allows you to see the broader world. I'll never forget when I was in my senior year of high school, and I always talk about this, and we had to read Shakespeare's Macbeth, and the language in which Shakespeare was speaking was so far removed than anything that I had been raised on in Baltimore City. And yet when I got to his, speeches about, his, how do I call it, conversation, the attempt by King to corrupt the two murderers into killing his friend Banquo, and I'm sorry, I'm going a little deep here. But when I read that language and one of those murderers said to, King Macbeth, "I am one, my liege, who the vile blows and buffets of the world have so incensed. Now I'm reckless to, what I do to spite the world." Forgive me if I've misquoted that. I thought, boy, I know dudes like that. That feels like Baltimore right now. And it was 500 years ago. You know what I mean? And like that is the power of literature. And what that told me was I was a human being. because there were sentiments and emotions that I was seeing in my world, which, as I said, couldn't be further removed from the world of William Shakespeare. And yet there were things that traveled across time and space. And that was like, that just awakened something, very much in my brain, and it was a powerful tool when you live in a world that regularly denigrates Black humanity. It was just an extremely, extremely powerful tool. So, I'm a big, big defender of literature.
Absolutely. Literature transcends time. And the first book I read of yours was We Were 8 Years in Power, and then Between the World and Me. And it's clear that your personal experiences deeply inform your writing. How do you balance personal narrative with broader social critique? And what advice would you give to aspiring writers who wish to tackle complex social issues through their work?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, again, like for me, like it has to open up. If I'm just telling you how I felt about something, if I'm just sort of giving you my grievances or the things that I don't like or I'm pissed about, or navel gazing, as they say, then I really haven't done my job. But if I can, in a personal way, draw you close to me, make the world touchable for you through my experience, and then use that to open up and to go out into the world, then I've done something then, and that's always the criteria. That's always I don't, I try not to do personal narrative for the hell of personal narrative. It really needs to be, something that's going to open into the wider world. And so that's actually a challenge for me in my life, because what that means is that I constantly have to have new and different experiences, because if I don't, then there's no, the world that I can, open up for you is going to necessarily be limited.
So we've got Father's Day coming up this Sunday. What advice would you have for parents that are navigating their approach to conversations about race and identity, having those similar discussions?
What I would say is a lot of times as parents, we think of or we joke about our children as though they're burdens. And that's fine. You know what I mean? Everybody has, jokes and everything. But I don't think we spend enough time thinking about the gifts that children give us. I have in my life through, my grandfather, on both sides, certainly through, other relatives and other friends. The situation that I think is familiar, to a lot of us, and that is where, we have, brothers who are not present in the household, and fathers who are not present in the household. And I'm not bringing this up to lecture anybody or hector anybody. On the contrary, what I would often say is, for those of us who are not present during the period of a human life growing to maturity, you're missing out. You're missing out.
Agreed.
It's like burning money. It's like burning. I mean, you might as well just burn money, man. You know what I mean? You really, really are, missing out, because, there comes a point where you have to say, what is life about? What am I doing with my life? What is my value? And I have to tell you, of all the things that I write about, and I do write about race, and I do write about history, and I do write about my own personal narratives, and I do have these broader social commitments. But the thing that grounds me at the end of the day is, I'm going to get off of this call, and I'm going to go have dinner with my wife. I have a family. I have the good fortune of having been in the company, and raised by people who loved me and supported me. And so, and I recognize that every situation is not like that, but those of us who are choosing, not because we have to, but are choosing not to be a crucial cog in a machinery of raising a child, You're burning money, brother. You're burning money, and you're missing out. So that's what I would say.
Agreed. Parenthood is a huge blessing. How do you view
Privilege.
the role of local communities and grassroots movements in driving national change? And what advice would you give to people who are looking to make a difference in their own communities?
Well, in answer to your first one, I mean, into your second one, I wouldn't give advice. I would get advice from y'all. I mean, I think, there are people who are on the ground who do a much better, job than, anything that, the job of writing can do. But I will say this, one of the very things that, dismays me a lot is I feel like we have a lot of us have a relationship to citizenship in this country that revolves around the presidential election every 4 years. And we don't have as much attachment to the local, everyday grassroots politics in our lives. And it matters. It matters. There are things that, are happening very close to you, very, very local to you, that just have much, much more impact directly and immediately than a presidential election. I'm not saying your president isn't important. Obviously, that they are. I'm not telling you disengage, from a presidential election. Obviously, you shouldn't. But I'm telling you to engage in more. I'm telling you to engage in the politics that is right around you. And I think a lot of us could, just really do a better job at that. You see, the thing is, though, that's not glamorous. Like presidential elections have a kind of, entertainment spectacle, value to them, whereas, talking to your, local city council person or whatever, your local representative does not, lobbying your local representative does not, but that really is the engine of democracy, at the end of the day, and that's where it all starts. And so, I would just encourage folks to not view themselves simply as national figures is what I'm trying to say.
Got it. So, in this work, I mean, this is difficult work and it takes effort to stay motivated and optimistic about the possibility of meaningful change. I want to ask you a question that I'm asked a lot of times during this type of conversation or after a presentation, and that is, given the many challenges and setbacks in the fight for racial equity, what gives you hope?
I tell you, I don't think too much about hope. I think a lot about my commitments. That is to say, I am a Black writer, which is a particular thing in this country. When I say that I'm a Black writer, I'm saying that I am a descendant of a group of people who, through the lion's share of their history in this country, had to steal their way to literacy. For whom literacy, reading and writing really was a treasure. And coming out of that is a whole line of writers who use their work to argue for the humanity and humanity of Black people, and really the humanity of all people. I don't have any of that, anything without that. I'm not anything without that. I'm not anything divorced from that. I'm not sitting here having this conversation with you. I don't get to write, Between the World and Me. There are citations in, Between the World and Me from everyone from Sonia Sanchez to James Baldwin to Amiri Baraka, and they're there because those are the people that really made it possible, among others, for me to, even write in the first place. I have a commitment to those people. They fought for the possibility of me. If you told me that everything was going to hell tomorrow, that the world was going to catch fire tomorrow, I would still fight. I would fight because I owe them. I have a commitment to them, just like they had a commitment to me. And then on top of that, I have a commitment, to the young folks, of this world that are going to come after me. When my time is done on this planet, I have to, be able to, in my last moments of consciousness, at least look at folks who are going to inherit the world and say, I did the best I could. I don't know how it all is going to end up, maybe I didn't, do, everything right, but I really was doing the best I could. And so I don't really have a non-fight, despair, lay in your bed, pull the sheets over your head option. It's just not on the table.
So how do you decide what issues to tackle next in your writing?
That's a great question. Usually the thing that's nagging at me the most. It's like the thing that I can't let go of. Because writing is hard. And writing, takes a really, really long time. And throughout that period, you have to be fueled. And so you really have to have a high level of interest in what you're doing. You have to have an almost obsessive interest. And so I generally look to the thing I have the most obsessive interest in, and I try to pursue that.
Okay, makes sense. Well, we're going to take some questions from the audience, but lastly, I want to ask you, are there any new projects or topics that you're currently exploring or plan to explore in the future?
Yes, I have a book coming out in October. It's called The Message. You can Google Ta-Nehisi The Message. And it concerns much of what we've talked about here. It comes out of my time teaching at Howard University, and it's about the importance of writing and the importance of literature. It is a book that is, more than anything, aimed at, the young writers of the world.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for having this conversation. Like I said, and as a reminder, if you have a question for Ta-Nehisi today, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. We'll get to as many questions as we can. If you have a question that does not get answered and you'd like us to respond, then please email us at events@metrounitedway.org. All right, so got a question here about your essay, The Case for Reparations, which I read in The Atlantic, and it sparked some widespread debate. What progress, if any, do you see in the conversation about reparations, and what steps do you believe are essential for meaningful progress in this area?
Well, I think since that time has been quite a bit of progress. I think the main thing that's happened is I think people have begun to take it seriously in a larger group. There were always people that activists, for instance, that took reparations seriously. But I had the great opportunity in 2019 to testify on Juneteenth, before Congress, and that just to be there, was such a big deal. I know that there've been several local governments, state governments, city governments that have taken up the cause since then. And so I think there's been some degree of progress in terms of what needs to happen for it to be adopted widely. I think people would have to think about their country very, very differently. I think this country would have to think about, I think we would have to have a broader sense of what it means to belong to a public. We would have a very, very, very different sense of our commitment to each other. Americans are taught a kind of what I call in the essay a la carte patriotism. That is, on July 4th, I'm an American. On President's Day, I am an American. But when we want to talk about the enslaved people that some of these presidents held, that wasn't me. And so, we are all in to take from our past. We are not all in to give, according to the debts that our past has left us. And so I think people would just, have to have a general, sense, or greater sense, of a collective and a collective across time.
All right, so we have an audience member that wants to know, who are your favorite authors or biggest influences coming up?
Oh, man. E.O. Doctorow, novelist E.O. Doctorow. An incredible book, Ragtime, Billy Bathgate, The Waterworks. Obviously, Toni Morrison, who is responsible for a great deal of my success. I love The Bluest Eye. James Baldwin, The Fire Next Time. Obviously several poets like Amiri Baraka, Sonia Sanchez, who I mentioned earlier. Robert Hayden, tremendous, tremendous poet. I love Moby Dick. Melville, The Great Gatsby. I had the great fortune of reading some of those classics outside of a classroom where I was just kind of left to my own imagination, and that was, tremendous. So it's quite a few.
All right. We have an anonymous question. Have you ever had an idea/story you wanted to share and had reservations about how it would be
All the
accepted?
time.
If so,
All the time.
how were you able to overcome that fear?
It's my job. I get paid to do it.
That's
That's the job. That's the job right there. And if you're not a little scared, then it probably, wasn't a great idea. But yes, all the time. With everything.
Right. Just one or two more questions here before we wrap up. This anonymous attendee says that you said that local change and movements are critical as we attempt to organize and build power against white supremacy and colonialism in this country. Are there specific movements, leaders, artists, or writers you're following or moved by toward that goal?
I don't have the ability to answer that question right now, and I will tell you why. When you are finishing a book, as I have been for the past year, your head is like in the dirt. And so I haven't, I've been, again, I would cite the young people of this country collectively, the student, movement of this country collectively. But in terms of broader specifics, I probably can't answer too well right now.
All right. We have an audience member from Bellarmine University that asks, how can we foster imagination? How can we help our students find and use their voices?
Yeah, so I think for me, and even at my teaching at Howard University, I think about this all the time. Look, if you don't love what you're teaching, your kids ain't gonna love what you're teaching. There's just no way around. If you're not passionate, if you can't communicate that passion to your kids, then all is lost. I had an algebra teacher in 7th grade. I will never forget her, Miss Chance. And I would have, taken a lecture on whatever Miss Chance was interested in because she was that interested in it, and that, she was just a great communicator. I could tell that she loved math. She had a great ability to communicate, her love of math. And I think a lot of times we think we sell our kids short, and we say, well, you're not really going to want to do this. You're not going to really want to, know about this. But the real question is, do you want to know about it? Are you interested in it? Do you still, find yourself coming back to it? And if you do, your job is to then communicate that, to young people. I've been teaching now for over 10 years. It never would have occurred to me how much of a theatrical job it actually is. You know what I mean? And how much energy you have to actually put out. But that I just think that's really, really important. Next to organization, and making sure you're organized when you go in, I would say that's probably the highest quality. It may even be higher than organization. It's good to be organized. They probably run neck and neck.
All right. So thank you so much for taking all of these questions. I do have one last one here. How do you describe a racially equitable community? And what practical steps do you believe are necessary to achieve it?
Well, the step is obvious. I think reparations is necessary. A racially equitable community would be one in which we did not look at all of our socioeconomic statistics, and with, some regularity, in fact, an embarrassing amount of regularity, be able to predict who was going to be at the bottom. The socioeconomic statistics for Black people in this country are across the board bad. We are the most incarcerated. We are, the most per capita murdered. We have, the shortest lifespans, et cetera. I mean, you can just go down the board. Um, I don't think that's because there's something wrong with us. I think it's because the policy of this country has been, um, for much of its history, either to directly rob us or look the other way while other people are robbing us. And I think that has a great deal of explanatory power for where Black people are in this country today.
Mr. Coates, I want to thank you very, very much for this important conversation with us and for your time. Now we're going to hear closing remarks from Metro United Way's Chief Impact and Equity Officer, Robert Gunn.
Thank you very much, Trent. I want to say hello to everyone. As I always start out by saying, it is a great day to be alive. And to my Spanish-speaking brothers and sisters in the audience, es un gran día para estar vivo. Definitely thank you to Mr. Ta-Nehisi Coates. Hopefully that got us 4 for 4 right there with your brother and making sure that we got your name correct. A couple of things that you said that I just wanted to reiterate. 2 things that you mentioned really stuck out to me. The first one was you made the comment about the ability to imagine. And then later you talked about being passionate. So like you, prior to my role here at Metro United Way, I was in education for 20 years. So I completely agree with the ability that we have in classrooms and in spaces to inspire young people to see something differently and to think differently. All too often, I think somewhere along the path as older folks, we sometimes get disenfranchised, we get down, we just somehow, some way, maybe we lose our spark. So we maybe unintentionally take that spark from other folks. So the ability to imagine was really important to me. And then I wrote something down that you didn't say, but it reminded me. I wrote down, be passionate or else. And for me, I think in times of us trying to do really difficult community work, if we don't have that passion, we need to find something else to do. Because I think in times, in spaces where we do have that passion, that allows us to continue to imagine the what ifs. What if we lived in a world where everyone felt that everyone deserved the ability to thrive? What if we lived in a world where different perspectives and different voices were elevated and welcome to conversations versus being shut down for being different? Just what if we all took care and cared for one another in our community as if we were taking care of a family member? What might our world look like? And that's the type of imagination that I think we have here at Metro United Way, and really keeps us moving forward in our work. So thank you again, my brother, for your time today. We also want to say thank you to everyone for joining us. Of course, thank you to LG&E and KU Foundation for being our sponsor for this Buzzwords or Beyond Buzzwords series. Please visit our website for more opportunities to engage with us. And also for our next event, we will be honoring Hispanic Heritage Month. Tuesday, October 8th, we will be featuring Miss Alejandra Campoverde, author of First Gen, part memoir, part manifesto. First Gen is a story of generational inheritance, aspiration, and the true meaning of belonging. It is a gripping journey to reclaim the parts of ourselves we sacrifice in order to survive. Registration for this event is open, so please register by visiting metrounitedway.org/Beyond Buzzwords. Again, thank you all very much for your time. Be blessed and continue to have an imagination to be the change that you want to be. Thank you, everyone, for your time.